Welcome, boys and girls. Costin here with a quick discussion about the Masque of Slaanesh and why she really is the strongest and best legendary lord of Slaanesh in the game at the moment. It's kind of hilarious to think about the fact that with both Omens of Destruction and Tides of Torment, the free DLC lords actually ended up being the best of the deal, really. You look at Omens of Destruction and Arbol is definitely the star of the show, the best campaign design out of all of them, the most interesting one at any rate. And then you look at Tides of Torment, and sure, the Kala has her own unique campaign mechanics, and there's a lot of cool units in that, but it is the Masque that has overall the best playstyle that works, honestly, quite well for Slaanesh, and has a certain flexibility, if you will, in her campaign that also elevates it compared to others. So first off, let's get into the kind of benefits she does have. You're not necessarily going to figure it out from reading the faction benefit list, though having 10% extra casualty replenishment for demonic infantry is actually quite useful because, one, getting a casualty replenishment hero as Slaanesh does take its time. And yes, you do increase capacity at tier 3 as well, but first you have to get to tier 3 in order to access them. So having that early on, especially for demonettes, is a fairly significant game changer because a lot of the demonic units in the game are just going to take more damage than mortal units in a campaign. And sure, you can still go with mortal units. You do have the Blood Hole as tier 2, so you can, if you own Champions of Chaos, you can just simply decide, okay, I know you could go for a Mortal Settlement and go cast Warriors of Slaanesh, but you can get Forsaken as well. Sure, again, cast Warriors would be better in a number of ways, but still, you could convert the settlement, don't get me wrong on that subject, but until it is converted, you're probably just better off sticking with Demonettes and Forsaken if you want to do so. But here's where things get a bit ridiculous with her in her campaign. So Demonettes are going to be able to destroy the early game foes that she's up against. So you look at Jan Bo, you look at Alberic, you look at Marcus Wolfheart, they're not going to have the units to defeat Demonettes. Plain old simple Demonettes. With their armor piercing damage, their high speed, their pretty decent leadership, all things considered. Jan Bo is just going to recruit peasants. Marcus Wolfheart, who playing him against the Masque is a fairly painful experience because she's just demolishes your army. But Marcus Wolfheart, he starts as a port settlement. He's going to have spearmen and archers, and you eat those for lunch. So all the factions next to you that might be a problem, you are much stronger than them, with the exception of Skulltaker, who, with his bloodletters, would definitely give you a fight. Now, you'd still win that fight, for the record, because, again, Demonettes are really good, and their magical attacks means that they're useful against bloodletters, but it would definitely be a fight. However, it is not a fight you have to engage in whatsoever in your campaign. Your victory conditions do not involve having to deal with Skulltaker. Maybe they should, but you don't have to do so. Instead, what you do is you take the initial settlement, build a barracks, and voila, you get a vassal through Skulltaker, and suddenly you become from already a faction that has a very strong starting position to one that is unstoppable compared to anyone that might be coming up against you. Because it's one thing to defeat you, but defeating an entire army under Khorne, under AI control, is a very different situation. Khorne armies tend to do pretty well in Odd Resolve, and that's relevant for the AI because even though a bunch of Bloodletters aren't the best units for Odd Resolve, it means Skulltaker can basically demolish anyone that you declare war on. Like, you want to fight Albrecht? Go ahead. You want to vassalize some people and get unit flexibility? Go ahead. And in fact, it would be kind of hilarious to be able to vassalize Marcus Wolfhard and get Imperial artillery in the campaign. Though, don't worry, we can get access to that later on in this campaign if we want to through Karl Franz. But we'll get into that in just a second. On top of that, in your campaign, one benefit is that you don't really have to care about specific research. Like the Kala certainly has a research tree over here that she wants to invest in for some of the units. Though usually you're going to be much better off focusing on getting the construction time for provincial capitals and the growth over here. The other things, not so much, but just getting that construction time and growth is, generally speaking, a huge benefit in a Slaaneshi campaign. You also do have unholy manifestations. It's kind of silly that they removed them from the Kala because too many mechanics or whatever. What this does mean is when you're playing a campaign like this, you can easily, and I do mean easily, set yourself up in a situation where you are ping-ponging across various locations. Because you start with a cult in Karak-Azul, or, well, in the Badlands anyway, so Karak-Azul, and you can use said cult to teleport the Masque right there with her entire army. And then you also have one in Marienburg. This gives you options with the dwarves, the Skaven, the Empire, in terms of vassalizing, taking territory and selling it for the sake of vassalization. For instance, you can teleport over here, take Marienburg, not necessarily the easiest fight in the world, or the quickest at least, and then sell that, either keep it for yourself, of course, or sell it to Karl Franz and vassalize Karl Franz in this campaign, giving you access to range units and, crucially, Imperial artillery. Slaaneshi's main weakness in a campaign is actually in sieges, because you lack the wall breaker units, or units that can attack walls completely. So being able to vassalize these factions, either Dwarf, Skaven, or Empire, is in itself a fairly huge benefit. Of course, you do still have the top power ability of prolific cults, but just having 2 starting cults in useful locations that give you that kind of diversity in a campaign, and just being able to build one very quickly for unholy manifestations, is a lot of campaign flexibility. Nakari can do the same thing, but Nakari has a much more tricky early game than the Masque. And then on top of that, there's all the kind of sweet benefits that you get with her. So her army is kind of ridiculous. Like, you get charmed attacks for demonettes, you get benefits for demonic cavalry units and chariot units, which is like, they're already fairly strong units to begin with. So if we consider Hellflayers, very, very good unit, high charge bonus, not the most durable because it is demonic. So demonic units, you get that physical resistance, but you do have the downside of instability and lower armor compared to some other stuff. But here's where the Masque really ends up winning. So having Skulltaker as a vassal from very early on, huge benefit. Having those cults and getting one very quickly in a campaign, also a pretty big benefit, given the vision you have. But on top of, and it also means, very importantly, you can go to Marienburg, get the Empire, then go back, deal to Yambo and other things. Like, for instance, you recruit an entire stack of forces over here under the Masque, and then you're like, okay, so maybe I give Marcus Wolfhard a bit of time, so suffice to say. Maybe I don't attack him instantly, or I do attack him, defeat him, and then go to the Empire, then deal with Yanbo. That is a choice, by the way. Or you can vassalize Yanbo for selling him some territory. You don't have to limit yourself in terms of vassalization. Just vassalization for diplomacy is that strong. But then, we have the thing that really elevates it. So between the starting position and the flexibility that we have available over here in this campaign, there's another big benefit to talk about. And that is the dances that she has on every single army she has available. So some give you unit experience and boost the damage of your army, the Pageant of Pain. Access helps you with seduction and, things like missile resistance, missile block chance, and some useful army abilities. But then we have the Burning Bacchanal. And this is really what elevates the Masque and makes this the single best campaign of Slaanesh. Just this one dance substantially changes the entire playstyle in a Slaaneshi campaign. Because usually when we look at Slaaneshi units, the kind of options we have for recruitment purposes, one of the problems that is very clear, well, there's multiple problems for the record. The fact that a lot of cool stuff is tier 3, and by the time you're tier 3, you're dominating so hard that's not even funny. But what really defines Slaanesh are these glass cannon units. So you have units that may not have the durability, that can do a good amount of damage, but will also take a significant amount of damage. And suffice to say, that is not an ideal situation to be dealing with, because more damage affects balance of power, means battles get longer and more difficult, and also your armies take more damage, so your momentum may be slowed. But with this specific dance, that issue is resolved, or vastly improved, because she has, very early on, with a safe path, 30 armor for all armies. But you can get 30 armor to every unit in an army. It's not demonic or mortal. And suddenly, demonettes, which already destroy everything in their path, go from very low level of durability to a pretty decent level of durability. They're not going to be the most dominant thing in terms of auto-resolve, but it is going to make a huge difference. And then you consider things like Seeker Chariots, you consider Heart Seekers, you consider regular Seekers. You go from having a lot of these glass cannon units, you lose a bit of speed, though it's not really that much, but you gain a significant amount of durability. And then when you pair that with the casualty replenishment, you start to understand why things start getting ridiculous over here. And it goes further, by the way. You can give yourself, lose a bit of melee attack, but give Vanguard deployment for all units in your army and get missile resistance. And then, of course, the ultimate ability right there for each of these dances. This is what makes the Masque great. So starting position, vassalization capability, campaign flexibility. It is the most interesting Slaaneshi campaign. Sure, it would be great to start with a mortal element compared to a demonic one. The reasoning is ultimately because demonettes, with Slaanesh, you don't have the same incentive as, say, Khorne to get the demonic element. With Khorne, you have skull cannons and all that. Whereas with Slaanesh, you don't really want a provincial capital. Why would you want a provincial capital to be... why would you necessarily want your provincial capital to be demonic when you can make it mortal? And you can get demonettes, exalted demonettes, from a minor settlement. You're not really losing anything from doing so. So it's kind of silly to have that differentiation just for the sake of for demonettes. Would I rather recruit demonettes or chosen ultimately from a provincial capital? I think I know what my decision is on that subject. That is the one downside. But it's a heck of a lot better than dealing with the Kala's ridiculous specific resource. The idea of a resource system is great, but it didn't quite get implemented in the best possible fashion for the Kala, I feel. And also, she's just got that campaign where, sure, you can eventually get far away from Cafe if you don't care for it, but she does have a lot of wasted time early on in a campaign in Cafe, whereas with the Masque, you do have, again, that campaign flexibility, which means you can have very unique campaign experiences dependent on what you're dealing with. Anyway, that's all I had to say. Costin signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.